Coming up on this week's show, Nintendo's new rival to Spotify.
A fan-made Monkey Island game arrives.
And we talk 90s FPS with Blood artist Kevin Kilstrom.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our incredible friends at Bitmap Books. Now, one of their books you absolutely need to check out. Maybe ask for this in your Christmas stocking this year. I'm Too Young to Die, the ultimate guide to first-person shooters, going all the way back to 1992 up to the year 2002. Just imagine all the changes in that decade. 180 games containing all the classics in there, from Doom to Quake to Half-Life, GoldenEye 007 to Halo, lots more as well, and spanning a massive 424 pages. You can check that out and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And with our lovely friends at PCBWay, and I'm sure you're familiar with PCBWay. If you're in the market for a fully featured custom PCB prototyping service, they've got you covered. And they also offer services like 3D printing and injection molding, as well as their famous low-cost, fast turnaround quality boards. And have a look at the shared project section of their website and see what big supporters of the retro community they are. And you can get an instant quote right now at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 454, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And a very warm welcome to the podcast, a show that every single Friday, of course, brings you up to speed on what's been happening in the world of retro gaming from over the last 7 days. First half of the podcast is when us geeks have a bit of a roundtable chat about what's been happening in retro. And then the second half of the show, we welcome on industry legends to give us their story and talk about all these incredible games that we grew up playing. That is what this podcast is all about at its heart. And we do have to say that we are recording this day after Bonfire Night, so if you hear any loud explosions in the background of any of our audio, don't be alarmed.
Yeah, there's been like a fireworks war happening locally to me, so there may be some battles tonight.
When I was a kid, it was like Bonfire Night. Now it's like 2 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, but also it's not celebrated as much. I used to love going to a bonfire and eating toffee and all of that kind of stuff. Very British thing, isn't it?
Definitely is. Well, I mean, you know, we're big fans of this time of year anyway. And lots of stuff happening as the nights get a bit cozier. Obviously, the Christmas quiz episode will be coming up next month. And then looking back on the best of 2024 as we get ready to put the Christmas decorations up. But before we get into that, there is still a couple of weeks of normality before we get into all the celebrations of Christmas this year, including an incredible guest that we've got on this week's podcast. Now, we have noticed a bit of a revival of the old school first-person shooter genre. I think they're called boomer shooters, aren't they? And all these new kind of retro-styled FPS games that have come out in recent months. But actually today we're going to be going back to roots and talking about the 90s FPS scene with someone who worked on an incredible game. I'm going to be talking about Blood.
Yeah, Blood is a wicked FPS. Do you remember it, Dan?
I remember this game coming out. I didn't play it back in the day because I think when this came out in 1997, I was still rocking the Amiga 1200.
Well, this was a far more advanced than the Amiga 1200 of what it could do. It was an absolutely amazing title. It was actually in development at the same time as Duke Nukem 3D. So Duke Nukem 3D was, of course, developed by 3D Realms. So was Blood, but then Blood got passed on to Monolith Productions to kind of finish it off. It was a great game, and, you know, we have Kevin Kilstrom, the main artist from it, and his interview was absolutely amazing. I'm sure Joe would absolutely love this because Blood was a game with so much reference to horror movies back in the days, and Kevin and those guys, they were like taking Polaroids of, you know, weapons and then importing them into the game. They were just having fun with a kind of video camera, and that's how the whole game kind of came about. It felt like, you know, just a load of friends making a horror movie, and then something beautiful came out of that. But then Kevin later on, he worked on other productions at Monolith, which was a game called Claw, which was an absolutely amazing platformer for the Windows PC. Shogo as well, which was a mad kind of mech game, which had a mix of anime which is very strange. And also Alien vs. Predator 2, which, a lot of people absolutely love. And they regard that as one of the best Alien games as well.
100. I do remember the Blood got a remaster, didn't it, by Night Dive a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it had a bit of a cult status back in the days because, Quake came out and it was kind of seen as a bit old hat when it came out. But, now people look back at it fondly, and it was a gross game. There was loads of crazy weapons in there and lots of blood, of course. So we talk about the whole background of that, but also a lot of the references to horror movies in the game. And it's just great having Kevin on.
So no, Joe, you were playing a load of old school FPS games not long ago. Is Blood anything you played before?
I've never played Blood. I've always wanted to play it, but it's never come out on console. Even when they did the remaster, it only came out on Windows and DOS,
right.
Which I thought was kind of strange because obviously the resurgence of them all, over the last kind of 5-6 years, they have all come out on like Xbox and PlayStation and stuff. And yeah, this one never came out on multi-platform.
Yeah,
so
I think it was
always eluded me. People would just be like, "We'll just put it on PC, Joe," but you know what I'm like.
Yeah, I think it was because Monolith were a very kind of PC-based company, so all the stuff they did was released on PC.
Yeah, so looking forward to this one. You did this one solo because I was dying of man flu and Joe was rocking and rolling with his band at the weekend. So this is one Ravi did solo at the weekend. So looking forward to hearing this one. Our special guest, Kevin Kilstrom, coming up on the podcast in around half an hour from now. Now, before that, of course, this is when we have a little bit of a chat about what's been happening over the last week. And this is quite a story that came out of nowhere. When you guys are driving around, what do you generally listen to in the car?
Spotify.
Dan Wood on the radio.
Rock and roll. Dan Wood radio. Yeah, actually, we do a little bit.
Well, I normally have podcasts playing and occasionally a bit of YouTube music or Amazon. I'm not really a Spotify guy, if I'm honest. But I have got something new on my phone that I downloaded the other day where you can play. Obviously, I hope I don't get copyright strike for this. And so I'm going to just play it on my phone, not too close to the microphone. Of course, this is a company who are quite well known for taking down podcasts and videos. This is the new Nintendo Music application. So that is Boss Bossa Nova, the boss's theme from Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy's Kong Quest.
So this is kind of like a Spotify style service just for Nintendo video game music then.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And I mean, there's not a lot on it at the moment. I think they've got on here right now, there's only about 25 games that you can choose from. And that kind of, got stuff on here like Mario Kart 8, which could be quite dangerous listening to that. Someone did point out on our Discord when you're driving down the M1. Donkey Kong Country soundtracks on there as well. That's made David Wise did that, wasn't it?
Was, yeah.
Yeah, and you got stuff like Pikmin on there as well, and Zelda Breath of the Wild, Kirby Star Allies, Super Mario Galaxy. There's some, the Wii Channels music's on here as well.
Nice.
Which is quite nice if you want to, drive along and listen to the Wii menu startup.
And are there Nintendo adverts in it as well?
No, not so far. It is literally just randomly you've got the Wii Shop channel music, the Me channel. So
people just miss them.
Yeah, I think that might be it because I did turn on my my Wii U. I'm probably going back a year or two now, but even that was nostalgic hearing that kind of start of music. And you get the little the Mii's walking around at the start of the Wii U. And there's there's only one Game Boy Advance game on here at the moment. You've got Metroid Prime, from the GameCube is on here. There's a couple of N64 games, few Super Nintendo games. There's only 3 NES games, Metroid, the Disk System version, and the original Super Mario Brothers is on here as well. 16 tracks of which. So it's pretty cool to have this, small selection of games. One little feature that's quite nice about it is you can actually extend the soundtracks, to, I think you make them either 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. So if you basically wanted to kind of loop and extend the Mario Brothers theme, to an hour long to cover your car journey, you could do that. So it's an interesting idea. And this is literally, it's just for people that pay for the Switch Online service. So if you are a member of that, you can download this for iOS and Android now.
I was about to ask, is it a paid-for subscription or is it free?
Yeah, it's more of an extra, really. So you don't pay any more for it, but
right.
You have to pay for Nintendo Online to get it.
Okay, so you download the app and you put your account details in if you've already got Nintendo Live, essentially.
Yeah, I think this is really good. I also think, I'd love to see one for just general video game music as well, not just Nintendo specific stuff. But I do always worry about like Nintendo. They jump on everything, and even people, uploading footage of them playing games online, they jump on. And I wonder if they're getting onto the music scene. There's a great scene of people remixing stuff out there. Yeah. And I would really hate it if they started going into the kind of remixers world and saying this is not an official one. So, yeah, I think it's good that they're paying attention to their history, but I'm always cautious around Nintendo because there's always lawyers at the back, isn't there, somewhere?
Yeah. Some people have said that because at the moment, I mean, there are some video game soundtracks on Spotify. So there are a few on there, quite a few actually, I think. But yeah, if you want something like this, previously the only way to really get them was to kind of go into YouTube. But I imagine now if Nintendo have got this service that,
Takedown spree.
Yeah, I imagine that is probably going to be coming up.
I did see that one of the top comments on this was, I can finally listen to the beautiful Legend of Zelda soundtrack without having to come back to Spotify the next day and find that it's all removed and have to find it again. So, yeah. So it's good to know it'll be in one place.
And I assume these are all like Nintendo-owned tracks rather than third-party ones that are,
they are currently.
That are on the consoles.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's only 25 at the moment, and some people are whinging about that, but it literally launched like yesterday at the time we're recording this. So I imagine it'll be something that will grow. I mean, like the Nintendo Online services, when the NES and the Super Nintendo, when they launched, they had new stuff to it all the time. So I'm guessing they're going to be doing the same with this.
You know me, I always try to be quite positive on the podcast. I
don't want another app. Yeah. I prefer mini disc.
Yeah. It's like it's a big deal, and it's cool, and it's sort of unique, but it shouldn't be a big deal, and it shouldn't be cool, and it shouldn't be unique. If that makes sense, it should just already be out there for people to enjoy and listen to. That it is cool, but it's just like, come on, Nintendo, why's everything got to be so like locked down? Do you know what I mean?
They could put this out for free, couldn't they? Is that? Yeah, I mean, it could be an app that kind of advertises just their legacy
that, or the fact that it's even got to this, like the fact that it's like they could have just put it on Spotify 10 years ago. They've all like.
And to be fair, if they wanted some revenue, they could have had like links to the games that you could buy at the bottom of the tracks. Use them as a kind of incentive to get like this track. Then why not try the full game?
Yeah, find it on a ROM website. I mean, there are some limitations to it at the moment as well that some people have pointed out. I mean, it's iOS and Android only. There's no desktop and no web player interface. No CarPlay or Android Auto, which feels quite an omission. So it would be quite nice to be able to listen to these when you're in the car. Like Legend of Zelda music would be quite relaxing when you're on a stressful car journey. Some people have pointed out as well that you can't do Chromecasting. There's no Chromecast option in the app, which again, I mean, it's early days. That literally just came out this week. So I imagine that will be things that they can introduce over time. I mean, I quite like having all of the idea of having all the Nintendo soundtracks together in one app. And if this does grow into kind of a database where it's like every Nintendo game, in a year or two, I think it would be quite a nice thing to have on your phone.
I wonder what quality it is as well. If they released it in like, a high bit rate or something, that might be something really unique and like get the best quality of these Nintendo tracks.
But yeah, if you are interested in having some 25 Nintendo games soundtrack in your pocket, then that is available now. So in the Nintendo Online service only works out, I think it's about £1.75 a month, for all the games and stuff in the online play. So
not bad.
A hell of a lot cheaper than I play for Xbox Live and Game Pass and that kind of thing. So I think it's pretty good value. So it's a little added extra for Nintendo Online subscribers that is available in the App Store and the Play Store now. Now, while we're talking about cool things that impress me this week, this is definitely a me story. I did see a few people posting this in our Discord. And thank you, by the way, if you have done that, because we do have a little news section on our Discord server that you can join through our website, theretrohour.com. We've got a little invite on there. Come in. If you spot any cool stories, post them in there. We'll chat about them on the podcast if they catch our eye. And this one definitely did, because Monkey Island, one of my favourite games of all time. If not my favourite, it kind of varies week by week. but definitely my top 5. And this one I'm excited about, but also I've got a bit of a sinking feeling it might not be around for very long, because this is a fan-made Monkey Island game that looks incredibly high standard. I've not downloaded this to ever play yet, but it is free. I have watched the first 10 minutes of a YouTube playthrough video. Didn't want to watch too much because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. But this is a game called The Booze of Monkey Island. So this is fans who've come together. This is a Bean Adventure Agency, who are the team behind this. And they call it a love letter to the official Monkey Island games. And a lot of the characters that we know and love are in here as well. Now, what do you guys think about the look of this?
Well, we're talking about the period of Monkey Island where it's the curse of Monkey Island, right?
Yeah, so late 90s kind of stuff.
Late 90s kind of animated one. I wasn't a fan of that, but I know you loved it, Dan. And
yeah,
this looks like a really good, well done fan adaptation. Was it always voiced, or was there like a text version of it as well? Because videos I've seen from this, there's no like voiceover. Obviously, that would be hard to do without the voice actors there, or someone doing quite a good impression of them. But
there is no voice acting on it yet. And to me, when I was watching the video, you're right, Tim, and it does look very much like Curse of Monkey Island, which was like the third game that came out in 97. The one without Ron Gilbert, the first game that didn't feature Ron on it. But yeah, the graphical style is very similar. When I was watching it, it did kind of feel like the voice acting was missing.
Yeah,
that used to
and I think, like, to be honest, it's probably because it looks and it feels so complete that I'm kind of treating it as like an official release or something, because it looks so well done. And I don't mean to try to criticize it or anything, because this is a fan-made game. As a fan-made game, my God, this is absolutely amazing. To be honest, if you showed me this and you were like, oh yeah, this was one of the old Monkey Island titles, I'd be like, oh, wicked, The Booze. I never knew about that one.
What do you think, Joe?
I'm not very familiar with Monkey Island, not having played the games, but whenever it's interesting, because I'm clearly like the opposite of Ravi. Whenever I think of Monkey Island, I always think of the third game, The Curse of Monkey Island. That's what comes to my mind, like what it looks like. And it always throws me when I see the old kind of like 8-bit pixelated versions of it. I always remember it looking like what this one looks like. I'm just watching it right now, and from a kind of like animation point of view and, the drawing and everything like that, I'm with Ravi. I would just think, if you showed me this, I'd just think, oh yeah, if you told me this was an expansion that came out on PC in 1997, it was another game version of it or whatever, I'd take your word for it. I'd have absolutely no reason to doubt that, if that makes sense. Like, it's been done really, really well. Obviously, because I'm not too familiar with the game, have they used many assets from the game with the backgrounds? And
what's the whole idea? A whole idea behind The Booze as well. Is it a mixing cocktails kind of game?
You have to play the game, Ravi, won't you? Apparently, it's kind of like. Do you remember the original game? You got the 3 trials.
Yeah.
From what I've seen about this, basically, he's working with a barkeeper, and he has to convince 3 more patrons to frequent the bar, and then it'll help him get his ship seaworthy. Is apparently the story.
Oh, nice, yeah.
But yeah, looking at it, I mean, I don't recognise many or any assets from the original game in terms of the backgrounds and the characters. I could be wrong. I mean, it's been a long time since I played Curse of Monkey Island. It looks different to me. The music's a different matter, though. I'm pretty certain they're from previous Monkey Island games.
Yeah.
Of which, there have been quite a lot, include like Trials of Monkey Island and stuff over the years, and Escape from Monkey Island. There's been a lot of them over the years. I think, the music in the background has been lifted from previous titles. But I've got a feeling all the rest of it is
original.
Yeah, it looks like that they've done it all themselves.
And it's free to download as well on itch from Mac, PC and Linux as well, which is nice to see multi-platform release.
And I think there are a lot of things that will be familiar to Monkey Island fans. You've got the Governor's Mansion is in here. You can explore Booty Island, which is in Monkey Island 2. You got characters like a Little Wally, Cake Capsize, and they kind of throw back to, recall things that happened in the original 2 games.
Is it Disney?
It does feel like it's
yes. Okay.
Which makes me a little bit nervous more than the fact that Disney own the Monkey Island trademarks, and Ron Gilbert had to really fight to get it back to make a new game. I'm hoping the fact that, like you said, this is a free download, that it might kind of fly under the radar a little bit, because obviously they're not charging for it. But as we always know, I mean, once this kind of stuff's out there, it generally lives on in certain corners of the internet. But
Download it now.
Yes, that is the point, isn't it? If you want to get it downloaded this weekend, 'cause it looks incredible. And I'm looking at it, yeah. I mean, I've only watched a few minutes, like I said, because I want to play it. I don't want to spoil it for myself. But in terms of the dialogue, you know, the way like Guybrush is talking to the other characters, it feels like it could have come from like Ron Gilbert, you know, the original developer of the game.
It's got the
that same humour. Yeah,
yeah.
Definitely looks like it's there. In terms of the voice acting, like I said, it did kind of feel like that was missing for me, because looking at the graphics and not hearing it, you know, because I'm not used to seeing it in Curse of Monkey Island, I'm wondering if they, I mean, this is probably going way out of what is moral, but maybe, you know, there are services that can do AI voice cloning and stuff these days, or maybe sound alikes. Maybe someone in the community who can do a good impression, you know. There's always voiceovers out there.
Oh, I bet there's loads of people that can do a good impression of it. Yeah, it's early access as well, so you don't know. Yeah, they might do some updates.
Yeah, I mean, if I was Disney, I'd look at this and be like, these guys have done such a good job. Let's let them release it and work with them and, you know, polish it up into a full game. That would be awesome. But yeah, amazing stuff. So I'm going to check that out. I will link that in this week's show notes. Talking of hot new releases that are on the way, you must be hyped about this. A new House of the Dead movie is on the way.
Am I
Deep
hyped?
breaths, Joe. Deep breaths.
Joe's really down this week.
I am, aren't I? Yeah. So the headline, Monster Hunter, Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil director Paul W.S. Anderson is making a House of the Dead movie.
And bear in mind, the original Mario Brothers movie is like Joe's favourite film of all time.
You keep saying
high
that,
standards.
and I think
high
people are going to
standards.
start thinking that it really genuinely is.
You love it.
So it was announced earlier this week that Paul W.S. Anderson is attached to a House of the Dead movie that is currently in development, that he's going to write and direct. And he's working with a couple of people. He's working, you know, with a few producers and stuff who have worked on, who are either from Sega or have gaming backgrounds, etc. And he seems to know what he's talking about. I've read, there's quite a few large articles about this, and, you know, me being a big zombie kind of genre fan and House of the Dead and Resident Evil, etc., you know, I've been looking into it. So I don't really know where to start with this. So there is already 2 famously terrible House of the Dead films. I don't know if you guys know that.
I haven't seen them before. I've heard their reputation, but I didn't know whether they were, you know, kind of B movies, like they're so bad they're actually good kind of thing, or whether they're just crap.
No. No, they are. The second one is apparently watchable. I haven't wasted my time. Let's just put it that way. I've not watched either of them. But the first one is like, it is just, if you go on IMDb, it's like, you know, 1 out of 10. Like, it is just abysmal. I've seen many, 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 many YouTube videos about it and documentaries about it and stuff like that. And they're from, you know, the kind of early 2000s. Paul W.S. Anderson, famously behind, you know, the Mortal Kombat movie, which generally, as far as movie films go, is quite a watchable, half decent film. The second one, not so.
Are we talking the first one or that recent one?
The first one. He did the original one from 1995. And then he did, I can't remember which Resident Evil films he did. He definitely did the first one. And then I think he did a couple of the later ones as well, between 2002 and 2016. And once again, as far as kind of like cinema goes and film goes, they are brainless action films and they are watchable. They are definitely better than like the House of the Dead movie. You know, they're probably on par with kind of like the original Mortal Kombat movie, but not Mortal Kombat Armageddon, which once again was a truly terrible film. So my conclusion to that is, I think we're going to get an okay film out of this.
Well, they sound like they could hardly be worse than the previous 2. Then.
Yeah, I think we're going to get an all right film out of this. In terms of kind of like the lore of, you know, House of the Dead and stuff like that, it's apparently going to be based on the 3rd game, which was the one where you had the shotguns in the arcade, which came out in the early I want to say it came out around 2001, 2002, and then it was on the original Xbox when it came to home console. And that one's actually set like 20 years after House of the Dead 1 and 2, and the world is, you know, an apocalyptic wasteland, and, you know, mutants and zombies have taken over, etc. And you go back as the main character from the first game's daughter to try and like save him from a lab, etc. And it's all about the mutants and stuff like that. So he said it's going to be based on the third film, and he seems to know what he's talking about. And he even references in the articles the bosses, like the magician and stuff like that, which is the name of like one of the main bad guys from the House of Dead films, to a point where there's even Sega have worked with Hearn Mill Media to produce concept imagery for the film. It looks like good AI that's been like photoshopped and stuff. And interestingly, they have captured the look of like the monsters from House of the Dead quite well. They've got the I don't know if you guys have seen it, but they have got the magician, he's kind of like this demon-y looking guy with horns and armor. They've got one of the chainsaw hillbilly monsters, like zombies, and one of the bosses that stalks you in the third game, who's this giant like monster with like a big club. That's actually a police officer in the games, but he doesn't look like he's a police officer in this concept art. So I'm hopeful for like a solid 5-6 out of 10 film.
Yeah.
is my conclusion to it.
It's always been a game that looks like it would make a fantastic movie as well. So hopefully we will see one from it.
Yeah, so he's given away quite a lot actually, because he says it's going to be 90 minutes long. So they're not trying to do anything like mad, like here's this 3-hour, like kind of like, zombie opera, like epic film kind of thing. Like they are just like, it's a 90-minute fun action-packed film. And he says it's going to be non-stop action, and it's going to capture the essence of the arcade and the shooting the screen with the guns. Like he says that's going to, like, they've already got ideas for that and stuff. I'm hoping they don't just do what they did in the Doom film that The Rock was in, where it just has the random first person scene in it. But he says, they've got ideas around that and stuff. So, we might just get kind of like Fast and Furious with zombies, maybe. And it's just like over the top, non-stop silliness, and people might love it. So, yeah, I'm hopeful that it'll be mind-numbing, but I'll enjoy it, if that makes sense.
You know what? I want a typing of the Dead movie. It's like, like the zombie apocalypse. They've got rid of all the guns. The only thing left is Dreamcast keyboards. And they've got to defeat the zombies with that.
Guys, all we've got left is these Dreamcast keyboards. For some reason, they kill the zombies.
Yeah, just strap them around the neck and run around.
Oh, man.
That's what we need. There you go. If you need an idea for a section of the film, there you go. Have that one on me. So if you want to check out what we know about those stories so far, we will put them in this week's show notes. Now, a couple more to talk about, including taking you back to the era that we used to play games in our pockets before smartphones. We'll talk about that in a second. And also a rather big IP that Atari owns. So we'll talk more about that in a second. Before we do, let's take a quick second just to welcome a new patron to the show. Thank you very much for Derek Booth, who joined us on Patreon over the last week. We really appreciate any support that we do get on Patreon, because it's really the lifeblood of this podcast. And it's a reminder, if you haven't joined our patrons community, we do get a load back, don't we, Ravi?
Oh yeah, we give a load back. Yeah, we do our hangouts. We've also got extra podcasts called the After Hours.
Yes.
And on the After Hours, we talk about loads and loads of random stuff. We had a really interesting one. We'd not talked about controllers for ages, and I don't think we'd ever done like a proper controller chat. And we did a debate, and people actually came back to us and they said that was really interesting. One of our backers actually went out and bought a trackball from a result of that. A Kingston one, and it was just really interesting. And
there was one moment in that, because it was our top 3 controllers and 2 that we really didn't like. Joe and I got a bit heated in this one.
Yeah, you got a bit heated.
Yeah, we were
over analog controllers. Yeah, it's a really interesting to listen to, and you get some extra news stories as well on the Patreon, and it's really worth doing.
Yeah, and you can join our Patrons Hangout as well, which we're going to be doing this coming weekend. Now, as I said, I haven't been very well, so we did kind of move the Patrons Hangout forward a little bit, and we figure we're going to be probably doing the Christmas one early, because no one wants to do it, between Christmas and New Year in Crimbo Limbo. So we're going to do the November Patrons Hangout. Will be coming up this weekend on Sunday, the 10th of November, from 8 p.m. UK time. So if you heard us talk about these before and you think, I'd love to join, basically really chilled out, isn't it? We all just get together, a couple of drinks, and just geek out really for a couple of hours. Really friendly community, always very welcoming to new people as well. And then next month will be our Christmas one. Date for that to be announced, but probably looking like something like the 15th of December. We'll just pencil that in for now. Obviously, we'll keep you up to date on that. But just to let you know, there will be 2 more Hangouts this year. So if you'd like to join us on the November one, all the details to get on there, are on our Patreon right now at theretrohour.com. Of course, main reason you're doing it is just to make sure that we can keep the lights on, as we approach this podcast's 9th birthday in January. That's shocking, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah, so you can sign up right now if you want to join our patrons community, theretrohour.com. Now, a couple more stories to chat about before our special guest, Kevin Kilstrom, is coming up in just a moment. What do you guys, this might be a sound that you guys haven't heard for a while. Can you hear that?
Just. Have you got a cricket in your garden?
No, this is me scrolling through my iPod.
You know what?
Click, click, click.
No word of a lie. I heard that sound about 2 or 3 hours ago.
Interesting.
My sister-in-law was over, so were my in-laws, and they saw it as an opportunity to give her a load of stuff that they'd found in the attic in their home to her, and there was an iPod, and she gave it to my daughter.
Nice.
She was clicking it, and she kept on saying, "It's my tiny phone."
Well, you might want to get a few games on there for her, because you remember, obviously the iPod, a revolution in music. It's up there with the Walkman before it, and I guess Spotify today. But then there was a little menu in here. If you go into extras, this is an iPod 5th generation. I think this one I've got here, with a nice colour screen. And you go into games. Remember, there was a breakout clone called Brick in here. I've got Solitaire on this one.
That was on the original one, wasn't it?
Yeah,
because I had a Nano as well. I can't even remember if there were games on the Nano.
Yeah, I think there might be. I think Brick was on there. I've got a feeling Brick was on all of them.
They had a few colour games as well later, didn't they?
Yeah, this version of Brick on here is a colour version. You got Parachute as well, Solitaire. There's Music Quiz. That's kind of where it played little clips of your songs, and you had to identify which song from your library it was. But there were, and I must admit, this is nothing I did back in the day. And this story here actually kind of brought back a memory for me about hearing that this was a thing. So I'd completely forgotten about this. There were actually 54 games that were released onto iTunes that you could buy for the iPod.
That's a very niche thing, isn't it? You'd have your iPod and then you'd go out and actually connect it up and purchase a game on it. Yeah, I can't imagine there was a huge amount of players for it. But looking at it now, I've actually got some memories of it as well. There's a version of Peggle for it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We used to play Peggle. We got addicted to it to the point that we used to have laptops and we'd be sitting in a car park with our mates playing Peggle. So maybe iPods would have been an easier version of that.
You missed out there, Ravi.
Yeah.
There's Bomberman on it as well. And Sega even released a version of Sonic the Hedgehog for it, the Sonic the Hedgehog 1.
Wow.
It came out on the iPod, which I wasn't aware of before, but I watched a little play. Well, it's not really a playthrough. It's like a minute footage of it on YouTube. And the way you control it is with the iPod, the skip back and forward buttons as left and right, and the center select button is like the jump.
I think that's pretty cool because it's a different interface. It's a different device. And all these games had to be adapted for it. Like, you look at something like the Playdate at the moment that has that crank at the side. It's a bit of a novelty. And, using an iPod as a gaming platform, I think that's pretty cool these days, actually, and something to look back, and I'm glad to see they're getting preserved.
Yeah, well, that's the story here now. Obviously, it's something that was very short-lived. They only really came out when, the iPod got colour screens, and obviously, the iPhone came out in 2007. So this only ran from, I think it was like November or December 2006 to about January, February 2009. So it wasn't very long at all, literally about 2 years that these were available. You did have companies like I said, Sega, Square Enix, Electronic Arts released games on here as well. There's 54 titles they released, and they cost $7.49 on iTunes, obviously back then. So first I thought, well, how do you get them onto your iPod? There's no Wi-Fi. No, I thought, I remember now. You have to plug a cable in and sync them, don't you? That's the way you did it before we had the App Store. But then, obviously, when iOS came along, Apple deleted these from the iTunes Store before the iPod was discontinued for good back in 2014. Now, obviously, not being able to get these games anymore, like a lot of these digital storefronts, if you haven't got them on your device, they're kind of gone forever. But there is a little movement of hardcore click wheel game fans. That's what they call them, click wheel games.
Clickers.
Yeah, who are actually on a bit of a mission to preserve these. Now, there is actually a whole subreddit for the iPod. And there's a load of iPod enthusiasts in there as well. There's even a Discord server that you can join. And there have been people who've got these games in their iTunes library. But the only thing is, the way that people have been getting these. So say, for example, Joe, you had Sonic on your old iPod, and I wanted that on mine. Mm. There are people that will say, well, tell you what, you shove your iPod in the post for me, mail it to me. I'll plug it into my computer and I'll sync it to my iTunes, so you've got it on your iPod.
Right.
People have been doing this. Have been shipping them in like jiffy bags all over the world to build up the collection of games.
So it looks like you run a virtual machine.
Well, yeah, you jump in the gun a bit there.
Okay.
So this is how they've been doing it for now. So previously the attempt, well, basically you'd have to ship it off to someone who'd have it on their system and they'd sync it to your iPod. But yeah, you're right. There is a Reddit user. His name is Oslero, who's started a service called the iPod Clickwheel Games Preservation Project. So what he's doing is he's actually building, like you said, a virtual machine so people can basically use this to sync Clickwheel games onto their iPod. And this means you don't have to ship them around the world. Instead, you run it on a VM on your local machine.
Yeah, and it's using like a fake USB sync, a kind of pass through. You redirect in the USB with a virtual machine. That's pretty smart. Yeah, I think that's cool. And also because it's in a virtual machine, if it gets damaged or whatever, you can just put another image of it up as well, and you're not damaging the original.
Yeah. Now the only thing is, obviously, you can download this virtual machine, and then it still needs authorization from Apple servers. Right. I believe, because if you've got the game on your iPod, then you plug it in. Basically, Apple will say, "Oh, you've got that, you can play it." There's no real you don't own a copy of this. If it's on there, it'll let you play it, but it has to authorize with Apple server, which is still running at the moment. Oh. Obviously, the concern is that one day they're going to just shut that off, and then all these games will be unplayable. Mm. So it does kind of feel like this might have a bit of a time limit built in, which leads me on to think. I mean, there must be people with the skills out there to kind of bypass that DRM and just strip it out.
Yeah, but then it's Apple, isn't it? Like they were the kings of not letting you load stuff. And I don't know, maybe with jailbreaking and a lot of history behind it, but then I don't know if more of that's gone into the mobile phones than they would have with the iPods. It seems like a dark art, but it's amazing that they're kind of extracting them.
Yeah, or maybe you could get that Rockbox, couldn't you? You could put on iPods, like basically a third-party firmware.
Yeah, but you were kind of replacing the whole system, weren't you?
Whether something like that, though, could have like, a built-in kind of DRM stripper or just a fake kind of authenticator in there, maybe that could be a workaround.
Yeah. I'm not sure how deep you can kind of go with these things and how that actually works, yeah.
It is funny, though, because you can still plug, an original first-gen iPod into like a Windows 11 PC on iTunes, and it still recognizes it and everything.
You've done that, haven't you, Dan?
Yeah. It still works for now. Because for some reason I've got quite a big collection of iPods. Kind of got given a few and bought a few over the years, and I've got about 20.
Well, I've even been using a NetMD thing where I'm connecting a mini disc NetMD and converting MP3s on a Chrome website, and nice. That syncs with it as well. So yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, but I do like taking my iPod on holiday. I think I've talked about that before. For when you go to a hotel abroad, you never know whether the Wi-Fi is going to be decent around the pool or your phone service. It's nice to have just basically an iPod full of music. Shove some nice earphones in, listen around the pool. It's quite nice. It would be nice to have like Sonic on there on my next holiday though. So might look into this. So they have actually archived quite a lot of them at the moment. There's 47 games that he's preserved. So there's 54 in total. So it's nearly a full collection. But he said he won't settle until they're all there. So if you have got any on your iPod and you want to contribute to this effort, then I'll link that up in the show notes. Really cool, I think. Right, then one more story just for everybody else. A couple of extra for the patrons on the way. One of you guys was a big fan of this game. I've got a feeling it was you, was it, Ravi? Transport Tycoon back in the day?
Yeah, well, I was a fan of any kind of Chris Sawyer game, and Transport Tycoon was one of his like earlier titles. Obviously he went on to Roller Coaster Tycoon as well. I love Railway Tycoon. I had a whole time period of collecting Tycoon games, which I went a bit mad on. I had
I remember you doing that a few years ago.
Mall Tycoon 2 and like Skate Park Tycoon. Yeah, I had that as well. There was tons of them. And this one is really interesting because Transport Tycoon was such a big title, but the kind of whole thing about Transport Tycoon was it was multiple forms of transport. So it wasn't just like railroads or trains or anything like that. It was, you had buses, you had the whole economics that you had to balance, which was quite hard. I'd always go broke on it, especially on one of these games. And it becomes more of a game like SimCity, but obviously the primary focus is transport, which is interesting because looking at stuff like SimCity or City Skylines, there was a channel, I think it's called Biff Plays Games, and looking at that, he's gone into it in the way that he's kind of changing the traffic lights and moving the whole traffic, and he just plays these modern games, but focuses really on the traffic flow and stuff like that. People really love this, and it looks like Atari's actually acquired it.
Yeah, because this is Microprose. Put it out back in the day, didn't they?
Yeah.
Back in the 90s. But yeah, Atari have got the rights to the game now, which is interesting to see because I was looking when the last release was. Apparently there's like a mobile version of it back in 2013, but there's been kind of nothing in the way of Transport Tycoon since.
Well, there's been Open TTD, which was basically Open Transport Tycoon. And it's pretty amazing because it runs on absolutely every system. Like you have the weirdest Linux distro, that you think nothing's going to run on. OpenTTD will, and it gets ported to absolutely everything. So it's a huge project, and it's like an open source version of it. So I don't know how that's going to clash with, Atari actually owning it and then maybe releasing kind of ports or like a collector's edition or something, because OpenTTD is probably taken all of the Transport Tycoon fans, and it's ran for years.
Well, they also own Roller Coaster Tycoon, and the spiritual successor to this game, Locomotion. Atari already owned the rights to that, that was by Chris Sawyer as well. So in my mind, I mean, it feels like obviously they bought this for a reason. It sounds like they want to make either like a re-release, at least, or maybe a new game in the series, which would be awesome if it was with Chris.
Yeah, it would be. Chris is a legendary developer as well, and I love Roller Coaster Tycoon. I think it was Alistair Brimble as well. They had the music on for that series, so there's also a lot of like Amiga connection and history with those two developers, and of course they were absolutely huge series. Roller Coaster Tycoon kind of took over the theme park crown at one point as well. But I think you'd be happy playing OpenTTD as well, because that's on Haiku. It's actually supported on that.
Haiku, which is a alternative operating system based on the 90s OS BOS.
Yeah, and you can even play it on WebOS on your TV and everything. So it's
I've actually got a Haiku machine set up in my office, so I might give that a download.
It's kind of like the Doom of Tycoon games.
I think it is cool to see Atari doing this. I mean, as much as we kind of, we're talking last week about some of the random things they do, like the decanter set they've released recently, but when they're doing like, blind legendary games like this, and obviously we had the Intellivision acquisition earlier this year, that is a direction that I like to see Atari going in. I think, it is exciting when they do stuff like this. And actually another Atari news I did spot this week, they actually released some Atari Jaguar t-shirts.
Oh, yes. Over the weekend. Yeah. What are you going to be rocking those, Dan?
I was actually out with the missus at the time in a supermarket near here. And I was like walking around, got distracted. It came up like Atari Jaguar merch available from Atari now. I'm like, what the hell? I had to literally stop, and she's like, come on, like, we're going through the checkout. I'm instead trying to read it on my phone.
My friend actually sent me a message, Taz, a big shout out to you, sent me a message saying Dan would look perfect in this.
Yes. And a few people tagged me in Discord as well. Thank you for that, guys. But yeah, these are, if you haven't seen them, Atari have basically released a bunch of merch with the Jaguar logo on. So you've got the, they call it the, if you look at the Atari page, atari.com, it's on there right now. They've got the Jaguar hoodie. They've got a sticker that you can buy. There's a Jaguar t-shirt, obviously all in the jet black colour with the Jag logo and the Jaguar's eyes in there as well. There's also a hat. They're calling this a dad hat. Is that a style? Dad hat?
I don't know.
I feel
You're going to
attacked.
start buying dad clothes now. Yeah.
I feel attacked.
Personal now.
Yeah, it's good that they're focusing.
It's just a cat. It's just a.
It's good that they're focusing on the
The
Jag.
young people wear different caps. Sorry.
Must be, yeah.
Yeah, you've
Old
got to wear it
fart hats.
backwards. That's a cool.
Yeah, sideways. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, cool to see Atari doing something with the Jaguar brand.
Yeah.
Which, it just got me a bit
It's
excited.
I just remember those times when the Jaguar was a bit of a joke after, and there was kind of tons of them in Virgin Megastores, and
Yeah.
they were selling them
Should've
for a
snapped them
£5 or something. And now people are walking around in like Jag t-shirts. It's quite cool how things have come around.
Might have took 30 years, but finally it's cool. So I'm going to check that out. I'll put that, and of course, all the rest of the stories in this week's show notes. Right then, just a second to give a big thank you to this week's sponsor. That is our wonderful friends at ExpressVPN. Now, obviously, ExpressVPN, if you value your privacy online, which we should all be doing, going online without using ExpressVPN, it's a bit like checking in your bag at the airport without a lock on it. You don't know how many people are kind of creeping through your private stuff and looking at things. And that's kind of the virtual equivalent, because when you're using the internet at home or at a place like a cafe or an airport bar, for example, obviously all your traffic is flowing through the ISP servers, including your mobile network as well. They know every single website you visit, everything you're doing online. And actually in some parts of the world, like in America, ISPs are actually legally allowed to sell your information, everything you're looking at, to third-party advertisers. So if you want to put a stop to that, ExpressVPN reroutes 100% of your internet traffic to their secure, encrypted server. So even your ISP can't see your browsing history. Now, we're all users of ExpressVPN. Is the VPN we've used for many years. It's so easy as well, isn't it, Ravi? You forget you've even got it on.
Yeah. Well, I've set it to go on automatically when I go onto my laptop straight away. You can also have it on your phone. You can have it on your smart TV. It's really good. I've been traveling and I've been to hotels and been to some old rickety places with here's our Wi-Fi code, and it's just like written on the wall and everyone's like accessing it. Or there's been like open networks and stuff. And also, people can fake networks as well. Put them up and you think you're on airport Wi-Fi, and it's some kind of sketchy thing going on.
In the corner,
yeah, exactly. So it's great to be protected when you're out and about, but also at home.
So having ExpressVPN on your machine protects all your privacy. Like you said, fire up the app, one-click button to get connected.
Yeah, and it's incredibly fast as well. Like, if you're watching or streaming anything online, I don't get buffering with it. It's the fastest I've used, basically.
Yeah, and it's rated number 1 by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. That's what PC Pro Magazine did a roundup. They voted that their favourite pick as well, ExpressVPN. So if you want to try it out, really good time to do it by using our exclusive offer. So if you head to this website, you'll be helping out the podcast as well. Obviously, supporting our sponsors helps us out too. So protect your online privacy today by going to expressvpn.com/retro. That's expressvpn.com/retro, all lowercase. I'll put it in the show notes as well, so you can click straight through. And actually, if you use that link, you will get an extra 3 months for free on top of a 12-month plan. So expressvpn.com/retro, and a big thank you to our friends at ExpressVPN for their continued support. All right, well, thank you for checking out the news on this week's podcast. Of course, we'll have more for you on next Friday's show. Hope to see you on the Patrons Hangout this coming Sunday evening from 8 p.m. UK time. It'd be lovely to see you there. And next, we have got this week's special guest going inside the world of games like Blood, lots more AVP2, Shogo, lots more coming up with our special guest, Kevin Kilstrom. He's next on the Retro Hour podcast.
You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with Kevin Kilstrom, and we're going to be talking about the mighty Monolith Productions. Oh, just some fantastic games I loved on the PC. You know, Blood, Claw, Shogo as well, Alien vs Predator 2. Maybe we'll get a bit of Matrix Online if we can fit it in, because Kevin's done so much. It's nice to have you here, Kevin. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, you've heard the podcast before, and our first question is always, what's your first video game experience that you kind of remember?
I have so many memories from when I was a kid. I think I grew up right in the perfect timing. My grandpa and grandma bought a Pong machine, and I remember going over there to stay with them for the weekend or whatever, and just having so much fun with that thing. It's so rudimentary and just like so basic now, but it was so much fun. At home, we did get a 2600, the Atari. I loved adventure. We played combat. I think my friend Keith, he had one as well. So back then you'd get just kicked out of the house. Say, hey, kids, go outside and play. Don't come back in until dinner time. And we'd run up to Keith's house and take turns playing. At the time, we had maybe four kids or so at the same time, so we'd all just sit around on the couch taking turns. My other friend Tony, he had a ColecoVision, and he had this game Zaxxon, which was a sort of isometric view, and it was such a bizarre feeling trying to understand the height of your spaceship in that angle. I don't know if you've ever seen that game, but
yeah, I've seen that on my visits to America. I saw, yeah,
that was pretty fun too. So those were the two systems really that I grew up with. We later had a game, a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, but that was much later, I think.
I was wondering what your art influences were, because you were involved with Q Studio as well, and that was very interesting because it was kind of animation and stop motion, but video games, right?
Yeah, so my early influences were the Ray Harryhausen movies. I remember as a kid we saw Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, and just the other movies, like the classic scene with all the skeletons fighting.
Jason and the Argonauts.
Yes. Yeah. I was like, wait, what's that one? What was that one called? So I grew up with that when I was a kid. That really influenced my interest in fantasy and horror movies. When I was 8, I saw the first Star Wars movie, and that basically blew my mind because I hadn't seen anything like that. Pretty much nobody had, but it really sort of boggled my mind as a kid, and I was just enamored with all of it. And so those were my early influences. So it was not really based around video games. All of my early influences were based around movies and the stop motion. Also growing up watching Bugs Bunny cartoons, Roadrunner, all that stuff, Tom and Jerry, and just trying to figure out how it was done. So I was always very curious about how did they do this? And then I would study as much as I could. Not having an internet, I just would, no matter if I could go to the library or whatever, find a book about it and just try to soak up as much information as I could. And then just doing experiments with making flip books and understanding how all that worked. That was my early influence. And I think it helped out a lot because it translated right over to making video games in the early days because we didn't have computer animation. And so I remember I was just newly married and I was working at a screen printing shop. And my wife actually found a tiny ad in the newspaper. And it was Nick Newhart had put it out. And it said, video game artist wanted, experience with airbrush and stop motion animation, preferred. And which I had just done my whole teenage life, just experimenting with things, trying to figure out how things worked. I remember sending my resume and some pictures over to Nick, and he called me the next day, and we had lunch, and it was sort of like the perfect match because I had been preparing for this moment my whole life without realizing it. And when we talked and he told me, basically we were just trying to figure out how to get images into the computer. Everything I had been studying before was 100% applicable to video games at the time. And I was super lucky that number one, my wife Fran, she found that ad, and then I hooked up with Nick, and then we just started pumping out monsters, and I would making rocket launchers out of cardboard and plastic. I don't know. It was just so different. And when I look back on it, it's like, man, that was so much fun. And it was so, in a way, inventive because, Nick and I would talk and be like, okay, what do we want for monsters? Well, how about a monster that's based underwater, sorry, but also can get out on land and walk around. It's like, well, what about like a shark head monster or something? It's like, yeah, okay. So then I would do a quick sketch or something, and then he'd say, yeah, that's good, that's cool. And then I would just go back to my apartment and in my studio, just build it out of latex and whatever. And, just doing that kind of stuff. Or he's like, okay, let's put a pitchfork in the game. Okay, let me go out to my garage and get a pitchfork. Here, hold the Polaroid camera, and we'll take a photo of him holding the pitchfork. And then, you wait for it to develop, and then you scan it in. And he's like, yeah, that's not right. That's not the right angle. Okay, let's go take another Polaroid.
I love how analog it is. Like it's still, you're still digitizing stuff, but it's very like, creating it and kind of just making it there.
It was sort of a dream come true for me because it was so much fun. And the fact that we didn't have a big publisher who's just over your shoulder saying, no, you have to do this or you have to do that. It was more just, I have great memories of Nick and I just talking about what would be a cool weapon or what would be a cool monster to fight, and what would be the attributes. So
you were creating these for Blood then?
Yes, that's correct. That's what, that was my first project with Nick.
So that's great. So Q Studios straight away started with Blood. And were you kind of a fan of Duke Nukem 3D previously?
So Duke Nukem 3D was all being developed at the same time. Duke and Blood, before it was even called Blood, I don't remember what we were calling it, but both teams were developing at the same time and also working with Ken. And as the engine was being developed, more and more sophisticated. So it was very funny. I still have this really good memory of seeing Duke Nukem 3D at a very early stage. And like they hadn't developed the Duke character yet. And they just had sort of these rudimentary models running around this sort of makeshift city level. And I was looking at it thinking, okay, our game is so much better. Now, this was very, very early on. They developed the Duke character more and more, which was awesome. And I mean, that whole game turned out to be great. But it was just very funny that I have these memories of the early stages of Blood and the early stages of Duke thinking, this is pretty cool and weird and funny that these two games are being developed at the same time.
And just for our listeners as well, like Ken's engine, the build engine, he started when he was, I think, 14, and it developed up to that level. And these titles were really when it was kind of hitting its peak as well. But it must have been interesting working just before that kind of explosion of the build engine.
Oh yeah, we were definitely we were developing our games. Blood, Duke 3D, and what was the other one? Shadow Warrior, probably. As Ken was refining his engine and getting more features in. So the engine was not done by a long shot when we first started. So we were, let's see, I joined Nick in June of 1994. And I think for reference, Nick and I would look at Doom and Doom 2, I think. Pretty sure Doom 2 at that point. And using that as a reference for what we were trying to make. So, just as an example, because I hadn't seen Wolfenstein or I hadn't seen Doom before meeting up with Nick.
Wow.
I think the only game that I had probably seen that was, a little more recent up to that time was Arena, the Elder Scrolls.
Yeah.
I think that was it. And I remember when I would play it on my garbage computer, the frame rate was like 2 frames per second. It was weird. And then I went and at Nick's house, he loaded it up and he was running at probably, 20 to 30 frames per second. And I was so naive and so ignorant about what it was supposed to be. Like I had just been playing that game forever at such a low frame rate, but it was that it felt almost like a turn-based game. It was so funny.
like an old dungeon crawler. Right?
Yes, and then when I saw Nick playing it, I was like, wait, what? What is this how it's supposed to look? So I was really being educated into what I would say at the time, modern video games, while at the same time just using my art and animation knowledge to try to create something better than what we had seen so far.
Well, I think it's really interesting that they were in cross development as well, because that was 3D Realms, and Duke Nukem was a parody character as well, and Blood was also very much a kind of horror film parody. What influences of films were you getting from there, and how many references did you fit in? I remember there were quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot. So again, when I was growing up as a teenager, I worked at a grocery store, and right across the street was a video store. After work, I would go and rent a horror movie. So I was just watching all kinds of horror movies, and I was really interested in that because, again, I kind of wanted to go to Hollywood. All of my heroes were like Rick Baker and Stan Winston and all the guys making all this cool artwork for horror movies. So that's really what I was sort of focused on. And when we were doing Blood at the beginning, we didn't really have the Caleb story yet. So it was, when I think about how we developed that game, it's funny because it's not like developing a modern game now where you have a character who's the main person. Our original idea was that you were just another cultist, and you flipped, and now you're getting revenge on the bad guys or whatever. I don't even remember the early story. I don't even think we had one. It was more just, let's make a cool horror game with monsters and interesting weapons that we hadn't seen yet. Like all the stuff that we used to do in real life. Kids don't try this at home, but with a lighter and a spray can. It's like all my friends and I would test that out as a flamethrower. And we thought, wouldn't that be cool to have that in a video game? Yeah, that'd be so much fun. Okay, let's just do it without any regard for story or nothing. And so at the beginning, it was just put in all this horror stuff that had been influencing me. I just watched The Night of the Living Dead, the 1990 version.
Oh, yeah, with all the student actors in it.
And there's Uncle Reege in there, and he definitely influenced the Bloated Butcher for Blood. Oh, gosh, there's so many references in that movie. Army of Darkness and Evil Dead 2 was a big thing in my life at the time.
Especially with the monsters and stuff with Evil Dead.
Yeah. And that's sort of where Caleb came out of Ash quite a bit, actually. His kind of personality and the look, and then I don't remember. It was probably Craig Hubbard who said, "Hey, let's put him in a black trench coat or something like that." I can't really remember.
So 90s, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I was wondering the voice as well. Did that come in after the kind of iconic Duke voice, or was that?
Oh yeah, 100%. So it's really funny to me how it all came together, because there was honestly, there was no planning for a lot of this stuff initially. And not only were we trying to make a game, we were trying to figure out how to make the game at the same time. So all of the stuff you see in the final product is sort of miracle after miracle of things coming together. And it's a testament to the hard work of Nick and all the other people involved. There were so many people involved towards the end, but the fact that it all came together to be such a fun game is amazing to me. Because when we started, it was just like, what are we even doing? I don't know. Let's just try it. Just being young guys, not really having any any level of, I don't know what you want to say, like
I guess long-term like design planning, because it sounds
definitely.
like it's got that kind of feel of a couple of kids meeting up in the woods making a horror movie.
That's exactly what it was.
Then it coming out as a really amazing title.
It's I think about a lot. My whole experience, a lot of my experiences making video games, I relate it to garage band, sort of the grunge area, the grunge time, and garage bands, where you just like you just said, you just get together with a buddy and say, hey, let's make a video game. Okay, cool. What do we have to do? I don't know. I guess we need computers. Okay, what's next? It was just kind of one of those things. Okay, let's make a monster. How do we do that? Well, I know how to make stop motion puppets. Oh, that'll be cool. Okay, let's do it. Now, how do we get this into the computer? Well, I don't know. Well, you just have to figure it out. And I remember one thing that got me so excited was when Nick got me a Targa board. So there was a piece of equipment. It was like a video card, but it allowed you to capture a TGA from a video camera right into your computer. So we had, and I think, so Peter Fries and Nick, I think they spent all night trying to get this Targa board working for me, because I would just show up the next day. It's like, hey, what's going on, guys? You got my tools ready? They got this Targa board installed. And at that point, my excitement doubled, because now I could use that to put anything I wanted into the game. So then I got, the barrier to entry for getting sprites into the game just became under my control, because before that it was super difficult and we didn't have any way other than a Polaroid camera. And then we didn't even have a scanner at first, so we'd have to go to Lobotomy Software and say, hey, can we borrow your scanner? And then we're borrowing their scanner just to get these textures put in the game. So it was like a big process.
Because it was like 3D Realms originally, and then it got passed on to Monolith to kind of finish it off, I guess.
Yeah, so that was also an interesting day at Q Studios, because we were having so much fun. I was working with Jay Wilson. He and I were back in the family room, and with Terry, this other guy who was working with us for a little while. But Nick called me back into his quote unquote office, which was a back bedroom, because we were working at Nick's house for 2 years. And that was like, when I think about that, I'm like, man, Nick, you're so awesome to just do that. Like, can you imagine, like, you're married and you're just like, hey, we're going to have these guys just come and hang out at our house all day long, and we're just a bunch of video game nerds making a video game in our house. And yet the whole time, Helen's Nick's wife, very, very generous and a sweet person, but she just was, very accepting of these guys being in the house. But anyways, sorry, I get derailed sometimes. So Nick calls me back into his office, and he goes, hey, we are going to go. I had met Jason Hall a few times. He says, you remember Jace? And I said, yeah. Well, we're going to go and work at Monolith. And my heart just basically sunk through the basement. because I didn't know what to expect. And we were having such a good time, and we were just pumping out levels, not full, complete levels, but just these really cool areas.
I was going to say the level design was fantastic on Blood as
Yeah,
well.
that was super, super cool. And so at the time I was like, oh no, like, well, I guess the dream's coming to an end after 2 years. It was a good run. Luckily though, when we went to Monolith, my excitement doubled because I was like, oh, I just got a nicer computer. I just got a Wacom tablet, and now there's all these other cool people here, like other very talented people, the guys working on Captain Claw and the guys and girls working on Shogo, and just having the sound guy, like having Cass there to work on the sounds, and things just started to really sort of come together more and more. Where before it was more just making cool things. Once we got to Monolith, those cool things started getting put together in a much more finished product.
It sounds like kind of a band rehearsing, then going into the studio.
Yeah,
laying down the album.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
I was wondering how hard it was to implement multiplayer as well back then with a BloodBath mode.
My gosh. Yeah. So I'm thankful that I am an artist and animator and, level design, because I was not involved in that, but I was aware of the difficulties. So, just hearing from Nick and Peter or whoever was working on it, just how hard that was. I was not envious of those guys. It was a lot of work.
It was probably the bloodiest game that was out at that time. Was there any backlash or controversy around it?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We were banned in Brazil, I believe. Blood was, along with a few other games like Doom and Duke 3D, which we sort of took as a badge of honor. It's like, oh, cool, we got banned in Brazil. That's awesome. And then I remember being told that you can't have any blood in a video game in Germany. So I need you to go through all of the artwork, all of the tiles, and make sure that anything that's blood is turned green. And at first I was like, wait, what? Are you joking me? This game is not even realistic. I mean, when you look at the graphics compared to like modern graphics, which is like, holy smokes, this is amazing. But it's all pixel art and stuff like that. But I was like, whatever I have to do, that's cool. Let's ship it in Germany. So I went through all the tiles, changed everything to green blood. And I didn't really pay too much attention to any of the backlash for the, violence in video games. I know that there was a lot of that going on at the time, but I didn't really worry too much about it.
Well, also there was a load of Easter eggs in the game. Were you involved in any of them? And
yeah.
What was your favorite?
Oh man, there's so many, and there's a lot of the guys at Monolith are huge horror fans as well. I would get requests now and then from the level designers, or I would just make something and stick it in there for someone to find. So I would add the tiles, add the art to the tile. What do you call it? Just the tile file, whatever. And then they would get the new one, and then they would look through all the new art to get inspired. And so I added stuff like frozen Jack Nicholson from The Shining. I added the Jason Voorhees mask from Friday the 13th and Freddy Krueger. I think the Freddy Krueger sweater and hat. Oh man, there's so many. And then also when they were doing the voiceover sessions, they would do a lot of quotes of different movies, or not just horror movies, but they were adding goofy stuff too. I don't know why, but I was never involved in those recording sessions, which when I look back, I'm like, man, why didn't I go to those? But I was probably so busy, I didn't even have time because I was
Yeah.
always just like doing everything else. So yeah, I don't know if I have a favorite. Probably the Frozen Jack Nicholson is my favorite.
Do you think it should have sold more? It's kind of became a bit of a cult classic, but didn't
Yeah,
blow up massively, you know?
no, and you know what the real problem was is it took I think 3 years to make, and Duke Nukem 3D came out first. 3D Realms definitely wanted Duke to be the first build engine game, and that was cool. But then Quake came out right before us, and I think that was detrimental to our, 2.5D game engine versus the new real 3D game engine. And I think that hurt our sales a bit because it was our game was, I suppose, perceived as old technology at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of like when something new comes in and suddenly everything goes, fully 3D and stuff like that. And there can be some gems out there and they just get like overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's what happened.
What were the kind of improvements for Blood 2 as well and the plasma pack?
So the plasma pack was very fun because it was still the same engine. We got to add a few things that we wanted for the original game, but we just, we were finally like, okay, we need to ship this guy. And so we got to add, I think we added the beast, the cultist that could transform into the beast. And
Yeah.
that was the original plan for Caleb, for you as a player, we had a bloodlust meter. And so if you're running through the game, you're killing bad guys, your bloodlust is going up. As soon as you hit a certain level, then you transform into the beast and you're faster. You've got these claws. I made all this stuff too, like the 3D, all the sprites with the beast claws and the animations and everything. And you would just go through ripping through everyone with stronger shields or health or whatever. That never really got implemented. But so that was pretty cool. The plasma pack was fun. Once we started on Blood 2, Nick was not involved, and Jay Wilson took over, and we added new people to the team that weren't really directly involved with Blood 1, and it sort of went off into... That was a very difficult game to make because we were dealing with the Lithtech engine.
Yes, yeah, and that was very 3D as well, wasn't it? And
yeah, that was a 3D engine. And the thing to me that was not very fun was because it was the time it was, you couldn't have these massive polygon characters or worlds. So to me, the world became less detailed, and there was just the monsters and stuff took a turn to less horror movie monsters and more sort of these weird Lovecraftian things, which to me, I like Lovecraftian horror, but it's not as fun as, say, Evil Dead type stuff. And we only had a year to make it. And just like the development of the engine at the same time, like, you're always building the plane as you're flying it.
yeah, because I think it was Shogo was the first like Lithtech one released, and then so I guess there was a little bit of experience there, but it was still kind of early days with it.
I think for me it was the level of detail. Like sometimes I'll go back and I'll watch these YouTube videos of people playing through Blood 2, and I look at it and I'm like, man, there's just not. It just doesn't feel like a rich world, which is just unfortunate. It's just a limitation of the engine and the time and the graphics capabilities of computers and all that stuff. So it's like, it is what it is. And I just think that 3 years of making Blood, I wasn't burnt out, but at the same time, it was a lot of work. And then to switch to a different sort of theme for Blood 2. And then also the game design was just way too over. I'm just going to say it was overblown because I remember having meetings at the beginning and there was discussion of, okay, we're going to have 4 playable characters and you're going to have 30 weapons to choose from and you're going to have 10 magic spells. And the whole time I'm thinking to myself, wait, we only have a year. Like Blood 1 took 3 years. The coolest thing about Blood was the whole company at Monolith was super excited to play test it every night. And I think that's why the deathmatch in Blood is so much fun. We play tested the heck out of that thing. Like every night we had these huge play tests with everyone at Monolith, so that we could really dial in, all the characteristics of the weapons and the damage and everything like that. And with Blood 2, we didn't really have that as much.
Yeah, it's interesting because at the same time, you guys were doing Claw, which is a like cartoony platformer. So
yeah,
a really good game. What was it like going from Blood to that drastic change in style?
For me, being an artist, I love switching up my styles. Like every other project I do, even for fun, has been you go from something really dirty, like just gritty, grungy horror, to something sort of friendly and cartoonish. And then you go back. It's like you hop around. So when I was working on Blood, we had another team. So at Monolith, we had, I think, 3 teams at the beginning. So I was on the Blood team. We had the Captain Claw team. We had the Shogo team. And there wasn't a whole lot of overlap at the beginning. When I was done with Blood, with my responsibilities, and they're like, okay, we're shipping this. Well, then now it has to go off for about a month or whatever to make the boxes and make the CDs and all that stuff. Well, I was just available. So I talked to my buddy, Garrett Price, who was the lead guy on Claw. And I said, hey, can I help? Like, I'm not, I'm free. So they're like, yeah, hey, why don't you do can you do the weapon effects for the different swords, like the fire sword, ice sword, and lightning sword? And I was like, heck yeah, I'll do that. That sounds fun. But they had already had their team of guys and girls working on it for a while. I'm not sure how long that development went, but it was really a fun, refreshing change to go from Blood to this cartoon cat pirate and
animated kid style. And I think it's really interesting as well because it was a platformer for Windows as well, and there was not that many. There was like Jackrabbit, and there was a good kind of history of some of them, but kind of aiming for that as the primary platform. And it's a really unexplored game. I think people would really enjoy it if they checked it out because that also had great multiplayer on there too.
It was a very fun game. It got to be kind of, I will say, the difficulty was ramped up quite a bit, but that was such a super fun game, and the artwork that all the artists did on that I thought was just really cool.
Oh, Shogo was another kind of crazy game because that was a mix between FPS mech game with anime. When you first kind of saw Shogo, what did you think of the overall theme?
I was a huge fan of Akira, and I loved anime stuff back then. When I heard that they were, when I would go talk to that team, I was super excited, and their artists were doing cool stuff, and I got to help them a little bit with world textures because, again, I was kind of free at the moment, and I was like, hey, do you guys need help? I'll help you guys, whatever you want me to do. I don't care. I'll just tell me what to do, and I'll do it for you. So that was actually another fun change. But at the same time, that was early, very early Lithtech, before I think it wasn't even called Lithtech yet, but that engine was really just being developed. And again, the thing that I didn't like was all the limitations. So like they're like, well, you can only have this many polys in the scene because we need to keep the frame rate up. And when I think of anime stuff like Akira, I always think of these super detailed backgrounds and all the lights and everything going on, and then being limited in what you could do on screen in the game. It was a little bit of a disappointment because I know that the vision that we all had for the game was probably a lot more detailed, if that makes sense. And you're really limited by the technology.
And I guess as well, Half-Life kind of came out like pretty much near the same time, and that might have, overshadowed it a bit.
That is definitely true. There was a lot of outside influences like that we had no control over that would affect everything that we were doing.
Well, you also worked on some awesome titles, but we'll talk about Sanity, and there were some hunting games as well, and Get Medieval. But let's go on to Alien vs Predator 2 as well, because I was wondering how you got involved with that, and that was such a kind of game to follow up, because the original, was on the Atari Jaguar.
Yeah, that was super exciting for me. So in my office, I had the Alien poster, the full-size Alien poster. I had Predator posters. I had grown up again as a teenager loving those movies. Like they're still just in my brain. And I can probably quote the whole movie from start to finish. Alien, Aliens, Predator 1, Predator 2, and now even all the new the new Aliens movies, the Alien versus Predator movies, like all that whole thing has just been ingrained in my whole life. I was actually working on those hunting games that you mentioned, which was actually a very nice change for me because, making games is kind of stressful at times, like most of the time. And when we were doing the hunting games, the stress level just dropped to almost nothing because it was so easy compared to what we had been doing before. But I remember I went into Garrett's office, and Garrett was the art manager. He was one of the founders of Monolith. And he goes, "Hey, Kev, how would you like to be the art lead on Aliens versus Predator 2?" And I was so excited, just like it was another dream because I love these movies. And I was so excited after that and just got to work immediately, just doing textures and, just all these concept ideas and stuff like that, and talking about it quite a bit was very exciting. When we started production, it was a little different than that. That's another game, Aliens vs Predator 2. That's another game where I look at the final product and I'm like, wow, that is another miracle. That how the heck did we even pull that off? Because at the beginning, I think there was only me for the art team, and then I got my buddy Ben Harrison came on to do world textures, and Ben's a great painter. And then we got Bryce Broadus, who's a great 3D modeler and texture guy. And he started making, I think it was the dropship. And when you start to see iconic things in your mind from the movies being created for the video game that you're working on, it's just so exciting. But at the beginning of development, we were very shorthanded. And we didn't really have a good path to success at the beginning. We were really floundering with trying to get any sort of cohesive story down or direction. And I remember having these meetings. It's because the other team, there's so much of Monolith was so busy. And I don't remember exactly what they were working on at the time, but Monolith was making games like Tron and Condemned and then eventually Fear. And I was sort of, the Operative, No One Lives Forever. I think they were doing that. So most of the company was very busy, and my team on AVP2 was very tiny at the beginning, and it was rough. It was actually not very not the fun experience I was hoping for.
It's interesting you say that, because a lot of people, when they talk about AVP2, they talk about the pacing of the game being great and kind of, how you build up and develop in it, and also, the accuracy with the storylines and the kind of single player campaigns in there being really good.
And I think it was a similar thing that happened with Blood, in that we had a small team, and I had some very good level designers available to me. I know that Nathan Cheever's, Ben Coleman, but we didn't have a focus, but we were all huge fans. So we knew what was right and what was wrong. And what we were doing at the beginning was creating level spaces that were very true to the Aliens and Predator universes, but there was no cohesive, here's the start of the level, here's the end of the level, and guess what? The end of this level goes into the next level. There was none of that at the beginning. It was more, okay, I'm going to, I'd be like, hey, Ben, can you go create a bunch of textures for, let's say, Nathan's level that's sort of inspired by the first Alien movie? So there's lots of light grays and whites and kind of like the medical bay type look. But then at the same time, I'm going to create a bunch of textures that remind you of the Sulaco, or maybe the place in Aliens.
I think like touches like that. So, the alien being from the alien's perspective, bursting out of the body, stuff like that could only be done by real life fans of the series.
That was a funny, okay, that was such a great idea. And again, what I want to emphasize is that the beginning of development for AVP2 was very disjointed, lots of creating cool stuff, but then the other games that Monolith was making basically were finishing up. And so we suddenly got an influx of a lot of very talented people to help us bring together all these puzzle pieces and stick them together to make a very cool picture. So that's how AVP2 ended up being such a great game at the end. Was we had all these building blocks made. We just needed more help. So guys like Nathan Hendrickson came in, and I think, I don't know, Craig Hubbard probably helped too, but all these people would come in and they're like, okay, we need to write a story, and we want to have the three stories overlap. Okay, well, we have all these building blocks, we can just put them together. And then the whole game finally started to really mesh and come together to be a great game. And that's where I call it another miracle, because at the beginning, I didn't really see that happening. Luckily, we got all this help from other Monolith people. We eventually had what I would say a full team on the project.
And multiplayer must have been fun as well.
That was another, and again, that was just like Blood, where multiplayer, when we got it hooked up, we were playing that every day. And we were, every day we would have a big play session and then lots of feedback. Oh, the smart gun's too accurate, or whatever it is, or the pulse rifle's not strong enough, or whatever. And just those little constant tweak, play it again, tweak it, play it again. All that really helped bring it together at the end. And then just the idea when we were making the stories for, okay, you're going to play as the Predator, you're going to play as the Alien, you're going to play as the Marine. Well, we were talking about, okay, you're playing as the Alien. Why don't you get to be the chest burster? Why don't you get to be the face hugger? How about that? You get to go through the whole life cycle. So that was actually a funny and super fun idea. And then it didn't take that long to build it out. And just the idea that you're inside the person's chest and you hit the attack button and it's like, it's just like, oh my gosh, so great. I think people got a kick out of that because no one had seen that before.
Oh, totally. Yeah. that was such a good game, and it was really nice to see it as a kind of improvement of the first one as well, because the first one was pretty groundbreaking.
It was very cool. And it was really cool for me to have that example. So we could look at that example and say, what, because they did a great job. Like the first game was great. And I think, how can we take baby steps to improve everything that they've done? And so that's kind of where we were, having a great example to play off of was very nice.
Well, Kevin, there's loads that we could talk about, but I think that's awesome. We're nearly hitting an hour already.
Yeah, that's crazy to me because it's been so fun talking to you, and an hour just goes by in a blink of an eye.
Oh yeah, it's some great memories. I was wondering what you're up to nowadays.
Well, today now, so after Monolith, I went to Microsoft for a year, and then I hooked back up with 3 of the founders of Monolith, Brian Goebel, Brian Bauman, and Garrett Price, and joined them at Hipsoft. So the second, several years, 7+ years of my career was making casual games. This was before cell phones, and it was amazing. It was so much fun, and we had a lot of hits with the Build a Lot series, and it was just a totally different world. Like I would have lunch with Nathan and the guys and Dan, who was over at Bungie at the time. Nathan's still at Monolith. We'd have lunch, and they're like, "What are you up to?" And I'm like, "Oh, dude, we're making these casual games." So like, what is that even? Like, we are unaware of that world, which is so funny because we both are making games, but the AAA space and the casual game space were sort of unaware of each other. And I didn't even know of the casual game space when I was at Microsoft, because I was working at Fossa Studio, and I didn't even know of the casual game space until Garrett reached out to me to come work with them. So it's basically stay-at-home moms was our base customer. It went from being, teenage 20-some-year-old young men as your customers for the AAA space to now stay-at-home moms and grandma and grandpa and everyone else. So it was such a different world, but it was so fun. And we did that, put out several Build-A-Lot games and several other games. And then once cell phones, became more of a mainstream thing, our customer base dwindled to very low, and we had to close down. So ever since then, unfortunately, I haven't been able to make games. I did make one final game all by myself for the most part, kind of as the last ditch effort to just get something out there. That was back, and that shipped in the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. But I've been working as in tech support. It's been fun and also frustrating. It's like it was fun at first. Now it's just not very fun because no one wants to talk to you until something's broken.
Well, Kevin, it's been absolutely awesome having you on, and I just love the kind of story of just kind of creating something and then it becoming something great.
Yeah, it was. Well, thank you. I've enjoyed talking with you too. It's so much fun. I don't get to talk about video games very often, but it was such a big part of my life, and I know so many people in the industry, and I know so much about game creation that I just get so excited talking about it. And then, of course, reminiscing about the good old days is always fun.